We are now live streaming as well. For those of you who are joining and saying, hey, why do I have to wait for those people who are late? I was here on time. You have the leisurely activity of going right to the workshop right here. I just put the link in the chat. You can actually, unlike in school, you can jump ahead, you can jump around, you can look at the slides in advance. You can also do that after the fact. We'll be posting the videos of people as well in this workshop. This is the portal. Many of you who came in through this are familiar with some of the event page that you came into, but right here are the programs and the roadmaps that we have. We've done US to anywhere, all things US cross-border outbound. We've got US to Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. US to Europe is today. We've got US to Middle East a few weeks ago. We've got general omni-channel, cross-border payments, government and financing and grants, all cool things to help you go global. We've got selling into Southeast Asia, Latin America. We've got a Spanish language Latin America one coming up in June. Supply chain issues. If you're a seller of wine and alcohol, predominantly domestic, but some international, we talk about that here. And then export finance navigation tools. We got lots of stuff here. Feel free to peruse it for another 60 seconds before we go active on this event. Okay, I'm going to post all of this on our live feed. So if you have people who are interested in attending this, but jumping in and out, it's now posted live here. I'm going to post this in the chat in case you want to send it and say, hey, everybody, we're listening to this live. Okay. And now we are going to kick off in. So I've got a couple of quizzes while we're waiting, a couple of questions for the audience, and the panelists can answer these questions. Which country in Europe has the largest per capita theaters, not cinemas, theaters? What's your best guess? If you raise your hand, or whoever's first, you can shout it out. Who's okay? Thijs.
Yeah, I want to ask you, can you repeat the last part of the sentence, because
yes.
I hear
what country in Europe has the largest per capita theaters, not film theaters, but regular theaters in Europe? What is it?
Austria.
Austria. What was the other one?
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Italy.
According to the internet, the perfect source, Greece, surprisingly. And the information is they have one theater for every 6,667 people, whereas the US has one theater for every 324,000 people.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's something I didn't know.
Yeah.
But we have some Greek people working, so I will double check.
Double check if they've gone to the theater recently. What country has the largest actual cinemas?
In Europe?
In Europe.
Germany.
I'm going Germany.
Very close, but France, apparently. That seems to be pretty universal every site that I've checked. Now, here's one that's going to throw you. What city in the US has more theater seats per capita than any other American city except New York?
Oh,
this is for Scott, really, but anybody can answer this.
I was going LA.
Minneapolis.
Is it Minneapolis?
Right there, baby.
I love it. That's fantastic.
You got more. I mean, that's critical information. With that, really, you don't need to attend the rest of the webinar. I feel like we've covered most of the things you need to know. With that, we are going to start. I'm going to say to everybody, obviously, everybody here, you see these wonderful, very brilliant brains here. They are all here to share really cool information. I'm super excited. We've been working this for months on how do you enter the how do you enter the EU market via e-commerce. So they're all here. They're going to stay on until their moment to shine and speak, but they're going to go off camera and we're going to go one by one and really just capture these nuggets. So everybody that's here, thank you so much. Michelle is going to start us off with Salesforce. If you want to know what the roadmap is, again, if you're in here, I put the link in the chat, but go click on the US to Europe. That's actually the direct link, and I believe that is the one that's here. And if you want to know what the agenda is, this is the agenda. We're going to go starting on the top. Why would you even want to sell into Europe? We're going to go next to how do you get into what are some of the strategic parts about getting into the market? What are some of the step-by-step ways you should be thinking about getting in from an e-commerce perspective? We've got Bransom talking about it, Tice from Bransom. Obviously, the Europe data is going to be from Michelle from Salesforce. Then we're going to go into if you're going to be selling off your site into Europe, you've got a merchant of record model. Take a lot of the challenges off your plate and help you get into Europe without the headaches. Then we've got a little bit about duties and taxes, which actually will be touched on a little bit also from Digital River, but we have a module here from Avalara. They won't be joining us, but we've got it there in video, so if you want to do that. Then we've got cross-border marketplace management. How do you sell across multiple marketplaces in Europe with a more efficient model, maybe a centralized dashboard, and some really interesting insights on what marketplaces are doing in Europe. Then we've got cross-border payments. If you're going through marketplaces, how do you optimize your payment structure to repatriate those funds, get better FX rates and more? I don't want to cut off anybody who's going to be speaking. So then we're going to talk about brand building. How do you build your brand, SEO, and other aspects of that as well? And then we're going to get into, I believe, Exum is going to come on and talk a little bit about how does government support you going into Europe from a financing, and we've got a grants perspective. I think I jumped over one, which is choosing the right e-commerce platform. So if you are in the process of replatforming or thinking about, hey, should I be on Shopify? Should I be on BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Magento, any of these? What's the right platform for me based on a bunch of feature sets? So we've got a couple of really cool analysis from Coalition, from Jordan as well from Coalition. What's up? And then Michael Fazio is going to talk about SBA again, some of the data around some of the kind of tools around financing for your global expansion. I'm sure I've missed somebody, but you're going to hear them in a second. So everybody, feel free to go off camera, except for Michelle coming to us live from Chicago. Michelle, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
If you don't know, if you haven't been on the others, Michelle comes with such a deep knowledge, and she manages data and insights to create those kernels of knowledge for you. She's done this for our US to Everywhere workshop as well. So we're really excited about it. I'm going to show you real quick. If you want to access all of her slides, she's got a lot of great data here. I'm going to show it to you so you see it's here. We've also got a Middle East data points and other things, but we're going to go straight to Europe. A couple of reports here. If you're in the portal, you can click right through to the portal or get in touch with Salesforce, but I'm going to go right now to Europe. Okay, Michelle, I will shut up now.
Great. Hi, my name is Michelle Grant. I'm the Director of Industry Insights for Retail and Consumer Goods here at Salesforce. One part of my role is to analyze all of the data that's flowing through our Commerce Cloud platform and analyze it. So the data I'm about to show you is based off of real transactions on websites that are powered by Commerce Cloud. So this will give you a good overview of what's happening in Europe now, but also some nuances about the region when you think about your launch strategy. So if we could go to the next slide. This is a look at how e-commerce sales did quarter by quarter during 2022. Obviously, the region had a lot to contend with, especially with the war in the Ukraine. And so you can see in Q2, sales declined 12%. And that decline continued. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. And then especially going into the winter season when there were real concerns about heating costs. And overall, we saw the e-commerce market shrink by 10% for the year. So if you could go to the next slide, but it wasn't all bad news across all verticals, although you can see that most of the verticals were impacted negatively. General handbag and luggage was up, luxury handbags are up. So verticals that you needed for travel or returning to work or going out, going to events, those tend to do better in this environment as we see sort of a merchandising pivot from what you needed to stay at home, like toys and learning, home appliances, online grocery. Those did very poorly last year as it came off of really highs for during the pandemic when a lot of non-retail stores were closed. And then again, those verticals that you need, general footwear, luxury apparel, that you need to be out and about, those picked up steam last year. So if you go to the next slide, what we saw was that overall e-commerce traffic did grow by 2%, even though sales were down by 10%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is people are more price sensitive. Well, I guess this is the biggest reason is that people are very price sensitive. And so they're doing more price comparisons when they are shopping, and that includes online. And then in some cases, they may have been online and then saw the price and abandoned that sale because of high prices or the inability to afford that good. But you can see the split by device. So when you're going into Europe, you can see that the bulk of the traffic is coming from the mobile device, and that's pretty consistent throughout the year. And in fact, mobile gained share in Q4 during that crucial holiday season. So if we could go to the next slide. This is an interesting look at conversion rates. So when you go in and you're benchmarking yourself in Europe, for 2022, the conversion rate was 2.1%. So anything higher than that, and you're doing better than the market, any lower than that, you need to look into how to increase conversion. And we can see this is a bit more dramatic because of the chart, but it did pick up a little bit during Q4. Obviously, people are shopping with intent during the holidays, and so conversion rates do tend to be higher in the fourth quarter of the year. And if we go to the next slide, here's what we were looking at, the average selling price by quarter for Europe. So you can see sort of, again, when you go in, what kind of pricing might be acceptable on whole across all of those verticals. We saw the average price hover around $24 and $25. It did go down to 22 in Q3, but that gives you an idea of the average sales price for a single unit in Europe. If you would go to the next slide. And this is the discount rate. So this is how much discounts, what the total discount applied is to the checkout. And again, it's broken out by quarter. You can see you probably will look into, to be industry average, you're going to be around 15% of a discount to move the needle for Europeans. It did drop during Q2 and Q3, which was a good thing. But again, the holiday season ramps up, and it did inch up to 16% as a discount in the fourth quarter. And if we go to the next slide, so when you enter Europe, from our experience, we see that social media accounts for about 7% of traffic to your website. So thinking about that is important in how much you want to embrace social media as a traffic driver. And we did see it pick up in Q4 at 8%. So again, people definitely spend more time on social media looking for different products for gifts. It's winter, so people aren't really traveling, they're on their phones more. So we always do see this uptick in social media traffic in Q4. But overall, social media traffic declined 6%, which means that social media traffic lost share because traffic was up overall 2% for the year. So So Apple, when they implemented their privacy changes in April of I want to say 2021. You may need to fact check on me. All of the years are blurring together. That really impacted the efficacy of Facebook ads because of the targeting restrictions, and it made it more expensive. So we're seeing a very mixed performance with social media because of those changes, and these platforms keep changing the rules. And so again, keep that in mind, especially as you go into Europe, where privacy laws are much more strict, that social media may not be you should not rely entirely on social media for traffic. So if you could move to the next slide. Another important thing when it comes to any sort of region that you're going into is what kind of payment methods are you offering? And as you can see, here are the different splits by quarter by different payment methods. Credit card dominates. Others, sort of like electronic transfers, are still popular. There's unique European payment types there. And then you have PayPal is still very important for consumers to have that sort of easy checkout experience. And then buy now, pay later, which is pretty substantial in Europe, followed by Apple Pay and then gift cards. So you can have so this is a good overview of the different payment methods and the top ones that you want to include. So in an era of where sales declined for that year, Apple Pay sales actually were up 29% in 2022. And that's something that we see globally. Apple Pay, with the rise of contactless payments in the stores due to the pandemic, has really gained share globally, including in Europe, as far as a payment method. So that's something that you should think about, maybe adding to your website for that frictionless checkout experience to drive conversion and sales using Apple Pay. But again, as you can see, it is from a small base. And so if you're, limited into how many payment methods you want to offer, certainly PayPal is probably the first one that you want to add, unless your audience is younger. And then probably Apple Pay, based on our research, really resonates with younger consumers, and PayPal with Gen X and elder millennials who grew up with the PayPal as their default digital wallet. So if we go on to the next slide, we actually have Q1 data for 2023, and there are some positive signs. So it's not all doom and gloom in Europe. In fact, sales overall were only down 4%, which is good news. And then, of course, there are various countries that really drag down the growth. So Netherlands, Nordics, UK, Germany. So if you're looking at other markets, and maybe UK often is where people start because of the lack of a language barrier, but you're probably still looking at a challenging environment, given in Q1 it was down 10%. As for the other countries, I'm going to look at my notes to make sure I get this right. Spain, Eastern Europe, and other Europe, this is actually 2 years. This is the second year of sales growth in Q1. So these countries are growing on top of growth from last year. So that's a really good sign, that those markets are robust and sort of increasing the share of e-commerce in those retail markets. France, Italy, and Belgium saw declines in Q1 of 2022, and then so this is a bit of a rebound for them. So that growth isn't totally net new. It's kind of reclaiming a little bit of what was lost in Q1 of 2022. And then if we go to the next slide, the verticals, the growth is looking a little bit more spread out, right? Again, they all sort of struggled in 2022, but I looked at the top growing ones, and handbags and luxury apparel grew both in Q1 of 2022 and Q1 in 2023. So again, those sectors are doing really well as people get back to their normal shopping habits for clothes that you can, that you need to attend events and dinners and travel and all those things. Active footwear grew very, very strongly, as you can see, but there was also a decline in 2022. So that's coming back a bit. And so those are some of the key things, but you can also see that we're still sort of in this merchandising pivot where, toys and learning had such a big boom during the COVID years that it's down dramatically still in 2020. Appliances, sporting goods, general apparel, or furniture and food and beverage, like again, those categories are a bit challenged because people stocked up on so many things and replacement cycles are longer. And then also, again, the macroeconomic situation in Europe is just kind of as uncertain as it is here in the US. So things like general apparel are not as doing as well as they used to. So that concludes those slides for me. And
Nice. Okay, thank you, Michelle. I just want to, again, take a quick shout out to you and to Salesforce for supporting US businesses going global. You've taken your time out. I know that you get lots of big sums to go speak at conferences, to do these types of presentations, and taking some time out to give us the really Q1 2023. It's rare to get any data that's that fresh. So thank you.
yes, and if you go to the links that Josh showed you, you can track our data on a quarterly basis yourself as well. So you don't have to rely on me. You can go straight, as he's pulled up the quarterly index. So you can look at the metrics I showed you and even more here at this website.
And then here's the other one, which is you gotta tell us, what's this one? This is
And the Connected Shoppers Report is a global view of just everyone's commerce behavior. So it's built on surveys done with consumers as well as businesses.
nice. Now I noticed you don't travel with those flowers around you. That's just your headshot right there.
This is my headshot, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take what we get.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle, and we will see you around online, and we really appreciate it. I will put links to these reports as well in the chat as well, but please go onto the portal and check it all out. All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. Oh, Michelle, we do have a question, if you're still there. Do you have B2B data? There's some interest in understanding a little bit more, whether it's now or elsewhere.
Unfortunately, we don't track B2B data. Obviously, that's a huge opportunity and it's growing quickly, but that we don't cover it in our data.
No problem. We will find it. If anybody on the call as well has some insights on a B2B, we do have a few B2Bs on the call in the audience. So thank you. Again, Michelle from Salesforce. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we are going to calling up right now. We're going to call it Thijs from Branson. Let me just go back here. Thijs, I believe you're up with 5 considerations for entering the EU market. So Thijs, thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thanks for the invite, and very happy to be here today. You're gonna break down these 5 considerations. I'm gonna go full screen. Actually, before I do, we have some of these considerations written down here if you want to jump ahead. And we've got, obviously, if you want to get in touch with Thijs, he's calling in late just before Ascension Day in Europe. So thanks for you. Happy Ascension Day. Thank you.
And now I'm going to go full screen.
Perfect. So, first of all, thanks for the invite, and the pronunciation of my name was perfect. So my name is Thijs. It's a very, very Dutch name. So if you cannot pronounce it, don't worry. I listen to a wide variant of the variants of my name. If you have any questions in the meantime, enter them in the chat or the questions, and I'm happy to answer them straight away or otherwise at the end of the slides. for today, like if we start and look more generic to the European marketplace, I think that's a very good starting point to understand how big the market is in general. But then in Europe, it's very important to dive deep in every single country. Because as you all know, Europe is like a combination of a lot of different countries, and every specific country has their specific needs and requirements. So if we go to the next slide, we will start with some generic numbers about the total revenue of the e-commerce market in Europe, starting in 2018, all the way up to 2027. What is expected and projected, of course. So what we can see here is that 2018, we see like a strong growth all the way up to 2027, with a minor dip in 2022 due to like these macroeconomic circumstances, the war in Ukraine. But what also a big effect here is that you see like a big jump 2022 on 2019 and a big jump 2021 on 2020, which of course was a result of COVID, stores closing, stores opening again in the main markets as of Q4 21, Q1 22, and that's basically what you see here. And then later on in the year, of course, the war in Ukraine, rising energy prices, that are some circumstances that are not very beneficial for the European e-commerce market. If we look forward to next year, then we expect a growth again, and also all the way up to 2027, we see in the majority of the verticals that there's still a big transformation needed from physical retail to online retail. So if you're in the online business, these numbers look very promising. Then we can go up to the next slide, in which I made the top 6 of European plus UK, because of course UK is part of Europe, but not part of the EU. So you need some different requirements to enter the UK market. And that could be, of course, very interesting because it's still the biggest e-commerce market in Europe by far. On the second place, it's Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the Netherlands coming 6th. If we look at other markets, Austria, the Nordics, Eastern Europe, they're way smaller. We expect a lot from Poland, but we expect that to be happening like in 1 or 2 years. If we then go up to the next slide, we see that Amazon overall, if we look in Europe, is by far the biggest online retailer, followed by Otto. And actually, this is quite an interesting side because like up till 5 years ago, Otto had the stiff understanding that they could outgrow Amazon. But as you can see here, unfortunately for Otto, that did not happen. Then Zalando is following up. You see that Zalando is only a small portion of Amazon's total revenue. But as you all know, Amazon is a big generic marketplace selling a very wide range of articles. Zalando is very much focused on fashion. So if you're selling fashion, shoes, sportwear, accessories, everything within that corner, in big markets like Germany, the Netherlands, France, you are very much depending on Zalando next to Amazon. Then we have Apple, Tesco, VP, which is a marketplace, Carrefour, which is a marketplace, Ceconomy, which is the group focused on MediaMarkt, and then we see the Dutch local player called bol.com. So as you can see, Amazon is very dominant, but as we go to the next slide, I will show you that for a successful marketplace, or let's say a successful online strategy within Europe, you cannot solely depend on Amazon. And that's something, if you look at from all the generic numbers, so if you look at it from EU as a complete market, you are probably going to say, okay, focus on Amazon and that's it. But if you deep dive in every specific country, so the Netherlands being the 6th e-commerce market, it's a relatively small market, but you see that Amazon is only on the 6th spot. So if you want to dominate, if the Netherlands is important for you, start at bol.com. If fashion is important for you, start at Zalando and Otto in Germany. If we look at the French market is even more fragmented. And then if you go to the right, Spain, you see that Amazon is dominating there. And if you then see at the total number, still Amazon is the biggest marketplace. The orange lined online retailers, they are marketplaces. So as you can see here, marketplaces are, like in many regions in the world, dominating the online space. We can go to the next slide. So now we're going to deep dive a bit into every individual market in Europe. And because we only have 10 minutes of presentation, we're not going through all the 20 plus countries. But my main goal here today is to show you some insights in how different these individual European markets are. So the Netherlands is completely different than Germany, than the UK. Well, if you would go to Germany, you would not distinguish a Dutch guy from a German guy. You also are probably not going to hear the difference in language. But if you look at it from a cultural point of view, from an e-commerce point of view, the markets are completely different. So point one, the market is fragmented. Where you see that in Germany, Amazon is the biggest by far. So Germany is dominating more than half of all the product-related sales in Germany. In all the other countries, Amazon is a fraction of that, as we've seen in the previous slide. If we now go to the next slide, we see that cultural differences are extremely important. So 53% returns. That's the average return rate in Germany. If we look at the Dutch market, it's, for example, 10 percentage points less. So Germans have a very, very cultural understanding of returning items. And that's mainly because to conquer the German market, both Zalando and Amazon offered free returns from the start on. So Germans are very used to having free returns. Then if we look at the French market, we see that 22% of all French parcels are being shipped to a pickup point, which is the highest number of orders that are being shipped to pickup points in whole Europe. So if you want to have a successful strategy in France, then you are very reliant on pickup points. And there's a very good reason for that. Because in France, the majority of the cities is very small, and their house number logic is not always as straightforward as you would think in other countries. So people rely on pickup points to get their actual parcel delivered. And then if you look overall, then you see that the credit card is dominating the European market. But now, if you would look at my home market, which is the Netherlands, you see that 71% of the market share in the Netherlands, it's dominated by one single payment method that's available in no other country. And it's called Ideal. So what we see happening a lot of the times that foreign countries enter the European market, focus on the Netherlands in a later stadium, forget about Ideal because, of course, credit card is the most dominant payment method, and then miss out on 71% of the Dutch market. So cultural differences within e-commerce matter. If we then go to the next slide. Languages. Well, a lot of the people, mainly in the Nordics, Germany, the Netherlands, speak English, German, French. The conversion of web shop is way lower if you don't offer the local language. So then if we look at this picture, this is from a lovely city in Belgium, one of the smaller European countries. And in these countries, they have in Belgium, they have 3 official languages, which is Flemish, which is very closely related to Dutch, which is French, and which is German. So if you open a web shop in Belgium, you're officially required to put a lot of the content in these 3 languages. So that's something that's good to keep in the back of your mind. In total, we have 24 official languages. And in general, we can say that without translating and also locating the site to the local language, you are probably not going to succeed in all the different local markets. If we then go to the next slide. we see that again, the European market is extremely fragmented. And so on the right, we see all logos from all the local carriers. And then the reaction that I get a lot of these times, like, okay, but then we just take DHL because DHL covers all Europe plus the UK. But we see that in specific markets, if you work with DHL in Italy, in Spain, in parts of Belgium, your successful delivery rate is low, the costs are high, and the number of days it takes to return a parcel is too high. So if you want to comply with the best in market KPIs, and if we look at marketplace specific, some marketplaces, they require specific carriers, you need to work with all the local carriers, from which DHL, bpost, PostNL, and Correos are the most important. But it's good to keep in mind that one single carrier will probably not help you out in the complete European market. If we then go to the next slide. And then the fifth part, which is also important because it can have serious consequences, and that's what we call like local legislation. So how it works in Europe is that the European Union defines European legislation, and then all the individual countries, they can basically do with it what they want, as long as it's in a specific border. On top of that, every individual country has the right to add, of course, local legislation. So what do we see is that in France and Germany, we see extended environmental legislation. So if you want to sell anything that's either packed in carton or is electronics or is fashion, then in both the France and Germany, you need to register with local companies that process these packages and returned items. If we then go to Belgium and France, they have very specific legislation, which is not valid for the Netherlands or Germany, or not applicable for the Netherlands or Germany, but only in Belgium and France. If you have a promotion outside of a specific period, and you would translate it to solden, which is basically the translation of sale, then you get a fine. Because in both the Belgium and French law, it states that the word sales, solden, is only allowed to be used in these two very specific periods. So that's something good to keep in mind. And then in Germany, the last example that we have is at one of the first companies I worked. We sold a lot of items to Germany. And what happens there, if you need to have an impressum, which is basically an additional document that's only required in Germany, which states your company details, the owner details, etc. If you do not comply with that local legislation, you will see that competitors, that's their strategy to go through your site, see if it's all compliant with all the legal requirements, and they will send you an Abmahnung, which means basically a warning. And if you then don't comply, you will get a final warning, which can have like very serious consequences, like that you are not allowed to sell in Germany anymore. And you have to start a new entity to start in Germany. So I think these are like very good things to keep in mind when you want to sell in specific countries. And that would also be my advice. Look at Europe, the opportunity from Europe as one whole, but look at all the individual markets to make sure that you succeed. If we then go to the next slide. To help you do that, we developed this strategic map. If we go to the next slide, I will run through. So it all starts with strategy. And in Europe, we would say, okay, we're going to Europe. Which markets are we going to focus on? Then it's the integration part. It's the technical integration part, which you can do with companies like Channel Engine. It's the operational part, which we discussed, and with all the different carriers, the return solution, It's the content part in which you manage your content, localization, translation, and it's your advertising part. So every country requires their own advertising strategy, and every marketplace requires their own advertising execution. Of course, that has to be done by an organization. So every time you enter a European market, you keep those 6 blocks in mind. You will be sure you don't forget anything. If we then go to the next slide, you see how to work in Europe with agencies that can help you outsource this complete process. And I'm not going through all the individual lines today, but I think the most important thing here is that you basically see 2 models. One is managed and one is project. And a project, that's very useful if you have a start and an end date and you just want to get some work done. If you're not very familiar with the European market, then you can also choose for a more managed model, in which the agency manages your complete business, often performance-based. And if you don't then go to the next slide.
That was my next question. So what do you end up doing? So.
Yeah, so if we look at my company, we are specialized in bringing brands to Europe. So everything that I told you about, translation, localization, legislation, logistics, returns, we are able to do that. And how we do it is we work in teams. So we have the Brands and Promise, which consists of a dedicated consultants, verticals, teams that work in verticals, so know your industry. Of course, we are a Channel Engine Gold partner, and we are a partner of Amazon, Bol.com, Zalando, and About You. So all the big marketplaces that are out there in Europe. And if we then go to the next slide, we always scope. We do that with the 6 pillars we just mentioned. Then we go through an integration, go live, and business as usual. And this way, you make sure basically that you always succeed in Europe, and you don't forget anything. Up to speed to market is really short, and we can really help you out. And if we then go to the final slide, I believe. Just to keep in mind, when is Ransom Project or when is Ransom Managed a better fit? Go through these few requirements. If you have any doubt, just contact us, and we're more than happy to help you. Also, if you have any small questions about the European market, feel free to contact us.
Nice, thank you. This is great. I just want to, did I cover everything? Yeah, there's some contact information, but also right here, just click on this.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, we do have a perfect question for you. You essentially are a layer over a lot of the things we're talking about here today, which is you'll say, great, it's so great to piece this all together, but you will take over the market entry and kind of management and growth for a brand in Europe. Is that accurate there?
That's the perfect description. So what? Yeah.
Okay, and so we have a company, for example, that's a baby chewable. What is it? Children's chewable vitamins. That's asked a question, and that's a perfect example of a complicated scenario where there's probably regulatory issues and others. Do you help that whole range of issues?
Yeah. So how this would work is we will start with this brand readiness process, in which we, of course, not only evaluate the brand, but also the products and all individual legislation. And here, what's good to keep in mind already, like the first example, if you're going to sell food in Belgium, you need an additional registration. So these are things to think of, right? And this is what we can help you out with.
Yeah, so you'll take care of some of that and then also look at it. And then the other piece of the questions that I have are, and I don't know if you're the right exact person to answer these, but there are phases to getting your inventory in and selling and shipping and delivery fulfillment for Europe. And some companies say, well, I'm not ready yet to go full into Europe, place inventory, lock up inventory for the market, but I want to start dipping my toe in. Can I ship from the US into Europe? Is that something that you would deal with, those phases, and help? Is there a scenario? And also, where in Europe do I place my inventory? If I'm targeting Germany, do I put inventory in Germany? Do I stay in the Netherlands and deliver throughout the European region?
Yeah, and in general, we see that route shipping directly from the US is quite expensive and complicated due to customs, import duties, and shipment fees. It is possible for smaller items with a higher value. In all other situations, it's quite easy to start a European entity with a European VAT number. And from that moment, you are allowed to store inventory in, for example, the Netherlands. And then that offers some advantage. So you can ship directly from your factory, even if it's not in the US. You can ship it to Europe, which saves you like double shipping and double customs. Or otherwise, if you manufacture, of course, in the US, you can ship it directly. So from like a certain threshold, and for a lot of the product groups, to be honest, like we always recommend to have local inventory. The good news is once you have it in the EU, it moves freely over all the borders, except for the UK since they left the EU. So if you ship it to any country, you are allowed to freely ship it within any other EU country. And then basically it's a very practical decision. If you look at the European map, then you would also always want to have your inventory centralized, which basically means the Netherlands as a logistical country, or Germany or Poland. These are the 3 top logistical countries in Europe where you can store your inventory and ship from to all other European countries.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Thijs again from Bransom. Obviously, he's got a ton of knowledge around Europe market entry strategy, management, and growth. Get in touch with him if you want. His info is right there on the portal, and I'll put some of it in the chat. Thank you again, Thijs. Have a wonderful Ascension Day.
Thank you so much for the invite, and have a wonderful day as well.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now. We're going to take a quick skip over this module on figuring out what the right platform is for you, because our friends at Digital River want to talk about the merchant of record model. I think it's really important before they head out, and they have only 10 minutes before they have to head out to another meeting. So I'm going to ask Scott to come on down. Scott, do you want to show yourself? Thank you, Scott Davis, coming to us straight from the heartland of America, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is that accurate?
Well, that is where I'm from. I'm not sure it's not sure Minneapolis is the heartland, but we certainly appreciate you having us on.
Thank you. I am in Indianapolis, where they call it, I think, the crossroads of America.
That's right.
So, and I think, I come from New York, so anything in between is the heartland to me. And what do I know?
We'll take it. It's cold. That's all I know. So
I want you have to go. So I wanted you to talk about this, because this is a really cool way to kind of have somebody be your seller, if you will, merchant, taking over that process for you. So I'm going to go full screen, and then afterwards I'll show some of the resources, even if Scott has to leave, that they have here for you to kind of look through. Okay.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
out.
Thanks, Josh.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess, as the folks before me mentioned, as you think about expanding into Europe, they touched on a little bit of the complexity. And I think what we typically find is that the complexities with selling in Europe, if you were a domestic US business, are typically things that you're not set up to handle. And when we talk to brands about what their core competencies are, you can kind of see those towards the top of the screen. In their domestic market, they may have figured out some of the things on the bottom half of this slide, but as they look to enter a new set of countries, specifically Europe, these are things that are specific to that region. So we typically talk to them and they say, we've got the customer experience and the commerce portion of our solution fairly well sorted. It typically extends really nicely from the US into Europe. They can use the same commerce platform or the same UX or CX layer. Where they're going to have challenges is in the things you see on the bottom half. So when we talk to brands, we're typically talking about right off the bat, what type of product are you selling? And does it make sense for you to put that inventory in market? or sell it cross-border. And both have their considerations and challenges, and both are pretty complex, right? And that's where our model comes in. And specifically, what it means is that as merchant of record, we're going to process the payment. We're going to do it using local payment methods, local credit card processing. And for example, in the Netherlands, right, we offer Ideal alongside things like other online banking methods, credit card, PayPal, etc., to make sure you're capturing that market share, the payment methods that shoppers expect. Beyond that, we're going to prevent and manage fraud for you. And then really kind of unique to our model, we're going to calculate the taxes in Europe using our legal entities and our tax registrations. And we're actually going to collect those and file them for you. So that's really core to the model. If you think about how our solution delivers value, it's really twofold. It's on the technology front, payments, tax, fraud, the integrations. We'll talk a little bit about logistics, but then it's also on what we call back office. And that's things that you would need your accounting teams, your finance teams, your tax teams, and to an extent, your legal teams to handle. So it's not just about making the technology easier to enter the region, but about bringing these back office processes and resources that you're likely not set up with, bringing those to bear for you. If you want to go to the next slide, Josh. So we talked a little bit about tax and payments. From a tax perspective, in some ways it depends if you're shipping in country or cross border, but the reality is that VAT tax is something you're going to have to charge in almost all situations. And in order to do that, you've got to integrate some sort of technology to accurately calculate it and then to collect it from the shopper. But what people often overlook is that if that calculation is wrong, right, or if you've used some sort of configuration with your legal entities or your tax registrations, it's not right, and you collect the wrong amount, or you simply don't collect it at all, you are now liable, right, to that local jurisdiction at the country level to pay a tax you may not have collected. And so part of our solution is the actual filing of the taxes we've collected because we're processing the end shopper payment and owning the liability and audit risk as well. I think given the time here, the last point I want to hit on this slide is the logistics piece. One of our big emphasis at Digital River is cross-border. And the way we think about it is if your product lends itself, as the previous speaker talked about, to needing to put inventory in country, think about heavy or low value products that it's going to be cost prohibitive for someone to ship it all the way from the US to Europe. You're going to want to think about putting inventory in country. And as you mentioned, in order to do that and sell it to an end shopper, you're going to have a local legal entity and do all the things that go along with that. If you decide, maybe you're selling apparel, fashion, health and beauty, or smaller, lightweight, and somewhat high value products, the other option is to ship it cross-border from the US. But that comes with its own set of complexities as well. In that experience, what a shopper expects is that during the shopping experience, you're presenting prices to them in their local currency. Along the shopping experience, you're presenting prices that include taxes and duties, meaning what it would cost for that product to clear customs. And so what our solution is doing is it's actually leveraging a very complex, sophisticated integration with Avalara to return taxes and the duties throughout the entire shopping experience. So when that customer gets to checkout, the price they see there is the same price they saw when they first viewed the product. As we all know, presenting that shopper with a bunch of additional costs at checkout is a huge barrier to getting that shopper to convert. So once they get to checkout, it's all about the things I talked about earlier, presenting the right payment methods that they're used to using, right? It's about providing low cost shipping options. And for that, we bring our carrier network to bear that ultimately focuses on consolidating lots of shipments in order to get your product into Europe at a low cost for shoppers. And then ultimately it's about converting that and making sure that you're preventing fraud along the way. In our model, again, what we're going to do is aggregate all these transactions for our customers. And then what we do is we take care of all taxes and duties and the shipping costs that we collect. We pay to our own carrier account. And what the brand is left with is simply getting paid out in aggregate across a bunch of end shopper transactions. Once a month, we send them a payment. It's free and clear of any other obligations. And we've just simplified their entire solution for entering the European market. So I know that was a lot. I wanted to hit on that here, given the time limitation. If you'd like to learn more, Josh can share how to get in contact with Digital River. And at the end of the day, look, we'd love to talk about what your potential model looks like, whether you want to put inventory in country or cross border. We really focus on meeting you for what your business profile looks like.
Scott, thanks so much from Digital River. Also, you guys made your kind of initial start with digital goods. If you have digital goods that need process, duties and taxes and payments, that's also a category you work with, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. We have plenty of customers who are just selling digital goods, or even those like a Fitbit who are selling a physical product and a digital subscription in the same transaction.
Yeah,
right? So it's one of our core capabilities is to be able to support all sorts of business models like that.
it's really cool. I actually learned about it only a few years ago, and just seeing kind of how you're addressing these challenges. And for a lot of companies who said, look, I don't want these headaches. I need somebody who understands all these pieces of the puzzle, from the payments to the duties and taxes. So really cool. Scott, again, thanks for joining. And I know you have to go. I think I got you in within 60 seconds of your departure time. So
Josh, I'm just really grateful you included me with the rest of these amazing speakers. And yeah, good luck with the rest of this. I really appreciate it.
thank you. Take care, Scott.
Cheers.
Cheers. Again, so if you haven't seen in the portal, you've got also resources from Digital River. We put a bunch of them all right here. They're going to load eventually right here. So we've got ebooks, country guides, merchants of record, what it is, ebook on passport of global e-commerce, payments, etc. So really cool links and of course contacts and all that stuff. So very cool. Now we're going to go next. I believe we're going to go backwards, and we're going to go to Jordan from Coalition Technologies. We're going to do two parts. Jordan, thanks for coming.
Yep.
We're going to do two things with Jordan. We're going to cover the cross-border, what is the right platform for you? And then we're going to jump over to the end here, because he has to also head out, called How Do You Build Your Brand Across Europe? Really cool insights on kind of specific to Europe. How do you do your SEO? How do you deal with all that, those pieces of the puzzle? So
Yeah.
Jordan, thank you. Where are you coming in from?
I'm actually coming in a little south of Seattle. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, but I've been remote working for almost 12 years now. So I'm a little south of Seattle. I've got blue skies up here, which is a rarity for us, but I'll take it for sure.
That's great. Well, 12 years, you were ahead of the curve on that one. You got remote work. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going full screen. We're going to get you going. So we've got Coalition, also partnered with Perimeter, another agency out of Quebec who does other parts of the puzzle for cross-border. But starting here right now, I'm going to shut up. That's what I'm going to do.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, I think just one of the things I would highlight right out of the gates is that the technology side is actually one of the easier things to look at from sort of the potential move to cross-border. Technology platforms, especially in the e-commerce space, have really recognized that there's significant value in providing a multinational offering for merchants who are in the US or in North America and are considering moving across any border. And so that's been really sort of one of the nice things for my job, whereas some of the presenters have already touched on some of the different headaches that are out there. Really, technology is one of those areas where we see, frankly, a lot of offerings that are good for merchants of all sizes, especially if you're looking at operating your own e-commerce website. Now, there's some complexity to it, or I wouldn't have to give a presentation, and we'll cover some of that in the conversation today. So if you want to jump to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the three big areas that you really want to have some thought process and some planning and some strategy in place before you look at moving cross-border with a website. And I really want to stress here, this is sort of looking at a more meaningful move cross-border. One of the beautiful things about operating your own ecommerce.com is that you essentially are globally available. You just need to think through a couple of things if you want to be successful globally. And so when we're talking to merchants about moving internationally, and we're looking at going into the EU specifically, we talk about these three big buckets, and we talk about what their plans for each of them are and how they apply to some of the different countries there. A really useful asterisk that's been highlighted a couple of times here is sometimes we think about going to the EU or going to Europe as sort of a one size fits all. You can tackle it and do it all at once. And it is a very diverse market, as has already been stressed. And so we want to look at how you're going to localize your experience, not only just your content, but your experience on your website. We also want to make sure that that checkout experience is going to be really well optimized for whichever region or country you're targeting. Again, checkout is as close to sacred as you'll get inside of an ecommerce.com. Brands really do win or lose based on that checkout experience and how well adapted it is to a particular market. And then finally, logistics. If you get there, if you're successful with your marketing content, if you're successful in localization, if you're successful with checkout, logistics piece of it really can either make or break you. And so those are sort of the three areas that we'll focus on a little bit here before we start talking about specific platforms. All right, we can go to the next slide there. So in terms of localization, again, we're not talking about simply translating content, although translation has become easier and easier and easier as time wears on. It's one of the great things about, again, technology that we have today. It's more accessible to get native speaker quality translations for a lot of different markets quickly. And with sort of unique optimizations for specific keywords and things like that, which we'll touch on in the second portion of my presentation here. We not only want to translate text, we also want to talk about really adapting our content. So in sort of that lower left-hand corner, we show how a set of photographs, lifestyle images, product photography, different types of banners and things which you might use throughout your site. Video is increasingly important to success in e-commerce. You really want to make sure that it reflects that market. You can succeed, you can sell product through your own .com without necessarily having sort of this adapted content. But we do find consistently that when you are adapting sort of that full range of content on your website for a particular region or audience, you're going to see a better outcome in terms of your conversion rates, in terms of the site performance with a particular audience. Now, we also want to talk about adapting our particular offering. You know, what are we sort of putting in front of them as an audience that is really sort of specific to that audience? Again, what are local trends? What are some of the different demands that we have? What are sort of the different price points that we maybe need to be considering? We heard earlier the value of a return in Germany may be something that is different than the value of a return in France. And so highlighting some of those particular things as part of your offering can be really, really compelling and important to be successful in terms of, again, looking at going across the border. And probably one of the final and more important pieces is really making sure you're communicating pricing quite clearly. I just had sort of a friendly reminder of the value of this. I got a traffic ticket, my first one in over 20 years from the wonderful country of Canada. And I was frankly confused as to whether I was paying in the Canadian dollar or the US dollar. Again, they don't care because I have to pay it one way or another. But when someone is electing to spend money with you, you do want to make sure that there is an accurate price display in local currencies, and you really want to avoid any sort of gotchas in sort of price changing as a result of that transaction occurring, and different fees that are associated to it, or the exchange rate changing after the fact. And so really making sure that's a key piece of your strategy on the e-commerce side is really a big deal. Josh, we can go to the next slide there. So if we look at moving to our kind of that localized capture, we want to make sure that we not only are showing the price in a local currency, we want to make sure that we're actually capturing it. One of the things that we see a lot of brands come in with some concerns or some issues already in place is they've gone and published a price in a particular currency based on a auto pricing or auto exchange rate feature offered by their e-commerce platform, but they weren't actually set up to actually capture that payment at that amount in that local currency. And so really making sure that you have that set up and your e-commerce technology stack is configured properly or has that capability out of the box. Again, some e-commerce platforms, either natively through their own built-in functionality or through partners, will also offer the ability to capture things like duties and taxes. Again, this can be a really pricey surprise for you. Something, again, has been touched on by multiple presenters today. These different regions, these different countries will have different local import taxes and duties that you're responsible for. And you can begin selling and find out there's a very expensive surprise for you coming down the pipeline as regulations and other things catch up to you. So again, this is a technology solution that's available for a lot of platforms today. You just want to make sure that you're set up and you're configured for that right out of the box. And then lastly, for that localization feature in the checkout, another big one is that multiple payment methods. Again, people have different payment preferences based on their particular country, and different payment methods have sort of different associations for users in different countries. And so some things are deemed more or less secure, some things are deemed more preferable or less preferable. And so having a technology platform that will allow you to tailor that payment method to a particular audience is super, super critical. We can go to the next slide there. Finally, again, sort of that cross-border logistics. We've had some great content that's been shared today from partners who are capable of helping in this particular area. But you do want to be aware when you make a commitment to your technology stack, sort of how it approaches some of these different challenges, because the right technology solution is going to enable you to do different things rather than be restrictive when you want to sort of start to look at how am I going to approach the UK, how am I going to approach France, how am I going to approach German audience. Some of our really successful international merchants who are focusing on the EU are actually blending some of these different approaches. Some are going with a owned warehousing solution where they are fulfilling in one country and they're using a partner network in another country. And that right e-commerce platform and technology is going to help address sort of how you're approaching multi-location inventory, either in a particular country or in a broader market like the EU, or again, looking at a global solution that's available. Next point there is that value of the multi-carrier support. Different shipping methods, different shipping providers, different carriers are going to be really crucial to success inside of particular markets. And you've really got to make sure that e-commerce platform supports each of those. And then this final point is probably the one that I would underline and maybe stress the most in this particular space. Almost all tech platforms today can be used for some kind of international effort from an e-commerce perspective. So again, sort of the perceived technology barrier to entry is pretty nominal. The big challenge often comes in how you as a business particularly approach doing that. Who are your partners? Who is handling logistics? Who is handling taxes? Who is handling customer service? Who is handling warehousing? And who is handling some of the different marketing efforts and things like that. You want to be able to integrate your platform into some of these different things And again, because the EU market is very diverse, you have to often be able to do 2, 3, or 4 different approaches, just given how you've approached a particular country. And so the ease of integration is really crucial. The cost of integration is really crucial in determining what the right technology platforms are for you. Josh, I think we can jump into that now and talk a little bit about some of the different platforms in the space. This is an area where there is a lot of evolution. I'm going to just touch on some of the bigger name brands. There are a lot of really great e-commerce platforms that have specialized functionality and also have specific regional focus that are worth considering as well. If we jump down to that next slide, we'll actually look at sort of where we see some of these businesses kind of placing out. And kind of look at how we sort of view them in comparison to one another. On the very far left-hand side, we have some companies that are really geared more as a content management system. So Squarespace and Wix both have an e-commerce offering, both have some international type features, but they're really more of a platform for publishing content inside of the US than they are for effectively selling products internationally. If we move further to the right, we sort of see the evolution of completeness of feature. I will highlight here that specific to the EU, BigCommerce is trailing a little bit in the back there in terms of that completeness of features, but for the EU is actually more competitive. This is a really good kind of glance at sort of a global picture, but BigCommerce has had a bigger emphasis than some other e-commerce technology providers on the European Union market. And so if your emphasis is there instead of perhaps APAC or EMEA, looking at the Middle East specifically, you may want to consider BigCommerce as a better contender here. Finds that good balance between SMB and enterprise and has a pretty rich feature set. Salesforce Commerce Cloud, certainly, we heard earlier, is a leader in large enterprise e-commerce offerings, offers a solution that is relatively complete, and has some real key advantages. Many of you are familiar with Magento, which is now a part of the Adobe family of products. Again, really well known for its flexibility. As a e-commerce technology platform, has been moving up market to focus more on enterprise businesses, which has left some of the smaller businesses who use the earlier community edition of Magento sort of behind a bit. Shopify certainly is the name brand in the space. Shopify is really well regarded as a sort of an easy to use, marketing friendly platform. Really, though, has its strength in the United States and Canada, has put a lot of emphasis into the focus on Asia. And so we see a lot of success there. And so I would say if you're kind of, again, maybe not, you're here today thinking about Europe, but Asia is maybe more of a priority for you. Shopify may have some strengths there in terms of logistics and payments and things of that nature. And then WooCommerce, it's an open source platform like Magento, which means that you can kind of do whatever you want. It's really useful when you find yourself trapped by sort of the restrictions that some of these other platforms have. But it is really useful to know open source and allowing you to do whatever you want can be a very dangerous proposition. It's sort of when I allow my 4-year-old to go outside and do whatever he wants, he usually comes back fairly messy and a little bit dinged up. And WooCommerce can be that experience, as can using sort of the Magento open source product. You can run into situations where you maybe over customize and you do more than you should, and that can create a barrier for you later on. If we go to the next slide, we really look at some of these different kind of category comparisons. Again, Salesforce Commerce Cloud really does well, holds its own, again, at sort of the top of the list here in terms of the completeness of the total offering, touching into different spaces like multi-language support, catalog localization, multi-currency display, multi-currency payment, location-based payment options, duties and taxes capture, and multi-location inventory. I will call out again some personal favorites. We work a lot with Shopify and BigCommerce. We hold top partner tiering with both of those particular platforms, and both have really invested a lot in offering a more robust and meaningful international approach. Down at the bottom, you'll see the key there for native support, partial support, or support through third-party solutions, and or not supported. And I would call out that, again, for most of these platforms, we've sort of highlighted as being a viable platform for going international or crossing a border. There's usually an option to sort of really complete a full, robust e-commerce experience for your own .com in any country. So it's very achievable. The things that I would highlight for you as a business, and you're sort of beginning to make this consideration, is really, frankly, I would start with budget. And then I would also look at sort of how you are planning on approaching key markets inside of the EU. If you're working with partners, you really do want to understand which e-commerce platforms they work with and support. If you're going to be very dependent on a Digital River or some of the other partners we've heard from today, you want to really understand who they integrate best to, which ones are going to create less of a friction for you. If you're planning on doing a bit of a hybrid approach, you're owning some markets yourself, you want to look again at which ones of these platforms are going to allow you to create a multi-storefront or multi-install experience where you can manage one, partners can manage another, or you can have alternative platforms blended in. And again, there we see BigCommerce being pretty strong in that particular category. I will note one of the ways that Shopify, Magento, and BigCommerce specifically approach international is they offer what's called multi-site or multi-store capabilities, which really allows you to create differentiated experiences as much as you need to. And so there's sort of an opportunity to have one single shared store for multiple regions when that's appropriate, or roll out additional storefronts, and in the BigCommerce case specifically, at no additional cost. So that can be a really useful consideration for you as well. If we jump down to the last two slides here, we kind of go through and do a quick sort of run through. This is sort of a very succinct look-see. I have talked for days before on each of these platforms and where they fit and the potential value that they have. I'm going to skip over Wix and Squarespace today. We'll look at WooCommerce and BigCommerce. WooCommerce is great if you are a publisher first, if your plan on sort of gaining traction inside of a new market is through content publishing. It can be very valuable. It is open source, so it is very flexible. It is just a very tricky environment. So unless you already know WordPress, the WordPress ecosystem, or have a great WordPress or WooCommerce developer, it can be very, very problematic in terms of going international, running multi-site, integrating to third parties. It's doable, just again, can be a lot of headache. BigCommerce, again, SaaS focused. One of the things that they use as a way of describing and differentiating themselves from Shopify that is very helpful is they refer to themselves as open SaaS. They're trying to find the blend between open source and software as a service. Software as a service meaning they provide a lot of rich core functionality and the cost is shared across thousands of merchants rather than having you pay for it out of your own pocket. Again, that no cost for multi-store is a really big ad that they've launched recently. They have also launched a huge initiative around B2B and are very feature rich in that area. So if you are planning on going international, planning on doing D2C, B2C, or B2B, or all of the above altogether, BigCommerce could be really a great platform for you. One of the things where maybe they score a little bit lower is in ease of use compared to a Shopify, which we cover on the next slide if you want to go that way. Shopify is a little more simplistic in its offerings and its approach. It's there in the middle, but it does have a pretty robust feature set. Really, to take it international, you're going to find that you end up running essentially duplicate or triplicate stores. Sort of the ease of use of a single administration doesn't really exist. It's kind of there, but it's not quite what it needs to be. But each individual store is pretty easy to manage, and that's why they're well regarded, especially in non-technical communities. Adobe Magento over there on the left really depends on having a great development support for it. And that's really regardless of which version you have. So if you're not a technical company, you don't have great development resources and know-how, could be best to steer clear of Magento. Far right, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, that it does have a really robust feature set, but is very much enterprise focused compared to some of these others. So if you're a smaller or mid-market brand, may not be an appropriate solution for you unless you already have some sort of Salesforce commitments. Bringing Salesforce Commerce Cloud in could be a good solution for you there. So that hopefully helps cover some of the different platforms. Again, a lot of different use cases, a lot of nuance here, and be happy to have that conversation with you offline as well.
Thank you, Jordan. We've got another section with you, but Jordan from Coalition Technologies, we're talking about what platform is right for you? I get this question all the time, and it's actually kind of like a kid in the candy store when I look at that sheet of kind of what's the breakdown of features, because nobody in an unbiased way kind of ever really tells you what's going on. So if you want to get in touch with Jordan, there it is right here, Coalition Technologies in the portal, or you've got that was co-developed with Perimeter as well, and there's a bunch of other tools and platforms. So now, Jordan, tell us, while we're here, have you here, let's go down to how do you build your brand across Europe? Some really interesting features for people who are outside of necessarily the marketplace, just generally building their digital brand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we get to talk about this. And this one is perhaps nearer and dearer to my heart, the marketing side. My backstory in getting into e-commerce was my brother and I launched our first e-commerce stores in the early 2000s as a way of improving our living situation, getting out of the dorms at the University of Washington and into our own townhouse. And so it was really just a money-making opportunity for us, and we've been doing it now for over 20 years. But we sort of recognize very quickly e-commerce is very much driven by marketing. And so you can't lose sight of how you develop awareness among your audience or your prospective audience for your brand. And so we really do a lot at Coalition. Our big emphasis points are organic search optimization, or SEO, and then also paid search and paid social. So that's sort of where we tend to cut our teeth most often, and where we have perhaps some of our best case studies. So if you go down to the next slide, one of the things that we really do love to talk about, and I'm going to try to keep time down here, is the fact that when you do cross borders, that there are some differences. We've already touched on a number of those in the course of the conversation: preferred payment methods, expectations around returns, different languages, certainly different rules inside of particular markets. All of those come to play, but there are some user behaviors which are shared. And so search engine market share is one of those areas where we see a lot of similarities to what we're used to looking at inside of the United States. Now, this could potentially change. Maybe perhaps Microsoft Bing with ChatGPT will really sort of change the dynamics. Google's obviously trying to counter that with Bard and with Magi as being its next phase release. But today, at least close to today, the expectation is that most people in the EU are going to use Google as their preferred search engine when they're looking again for sort of that .com. Amazon and other major e-commerce marketplaces have their own search engines, and a good SEO company in e-commerce can help optimize on all fronts. But when you're really looking at launching and developing your own brand awareness, going through the process of doing that with marketing in SEO or in paid advertising can be very, very effective. And so there's a lot of ways where, again, opening up this new market in Europe can be actually somewhat easy. You can carry forward and carry over some of the same things that you do domestically or in the US, and really find that you have some shared strengths when you move across borders. If you go to the next slide, we kind of touch on some of the key things that you should be doing if you're looking at an SEO campaign, and we break that out into a range of factors. I'll caveat that within these, there are some things that, overall are perhaps less important to sort of focus on in terms of the time invested on a campaign, but can still be a big gotcha. So way over there on the far left at about 3%, we have something like site security. Most sites, if you're using the big commerces, the Shopify's, the Salesforce Commerce Cloud, site security is largely something you don't have to be concerned about if you're using good password practices and you're not sort of allowing everybody access to the back end. But it is one of those things that can suddenly become a much bigger issue. And so again, we sort of have it as a lower priority in terms of ranking factor, unless you don't get it right, in which case it can be. And so we really look at a few different things in terms of being key for success in an SEO campaign. The consistency of your content, and in terms of what you're able to produce, how frequently are you publishing content, is really, really critical. Again, I talked in our last conversation about the platform selection, that sort of localization of content, the quality of your publications. Are you offering something that is unique and valuable inside of your specific space? Between those two things alone, you're really able to establish a pretty good deal of authority that is successful in SEO. And so if you're doing well in the US with those things, and you're doing well in Canada and North America with those things, chances are that there's going to be a good opportunity for you to carry over some of your same practices right to a new market. Now, obviously, we have to localize that and address some of those particular things. And so if we go to that next slide, we look at some of the things, again, that are basically the same as what we would do in the United States if we're going to launch a Google Ads campaign. So inside of Europe, we have very similar best practices for Google Ads as we do inside of the United States. Again, there are some things that you want to make sure you have taken care of that are a little bit different, but overall, again, a lot of the things that drive success in the US are also going to work inside of the inside of Europe, inside of European markets. Again, there will be some caveats which we want to talk about, and those are what we cover in that next slide. If you look at sort of the key differences that we talk about from an advertising perspective, the first one is audience. An audience in terms of SEO and pay-per-click with search in mind really do come down to content and language. If you are not optimizing your content and your content experiences on your site and also in your ad copy or ad creative, it really tends to close the door on your opportunity into sort of much of the EU market. The exception to that may be the UK. There are some smaller differences often in terms of UK, the Queen's English, and what us rebellious United States of America folk like to speak. But all in, our language is probably one of those big gatekeeper type things if you're planning on going and focusing in the EU. You really do want to make sure that you have a real clear plan to develop quality translations, and maybe not even translations, but quality native versions of some of your best performing landing pages and ads, and also have a really good understanding of some of the keyword differences. We've worked through a number of campaigns, and I'm always surprised by how localized languages can describe the same product in sort of a way that is quirky or funny to me, but is completely natural to them. So you do want to make sure you have a good understanding of how to perform keyword research as you begin to create some of that ad and that organic SEO or paid landing page content. Behind that, we also look at publishers. Google does maintain that dominance in the EU as a search engine, but as was highlighted, different sites own larger shares of social media, of news, of entertainment, of shopping, and more. We saw Amazon come up on a couple of the slides. I was talking about sort of percent of e-commerce market share. One thing that I would highlight that sort of blends this conversation between how to market in the EU and technology platforms and sort of the fit of Amazon is Buy with Prime. Currently, it's only available from Amazon inside of the US market, but I believe sometime next year, we'll probably see that released to some of the EU markets. And Buy with Prime allows you to basically integrate some Amazon shopping features into your own .com if your technology platform supports it, which again, a lot of the ones we highlighted do. And it allows you to then begin to advertise to Amazon audiences on Amazon to take them off Amazon to your own .com. You can then own that customer data a little bit more effectively. Last thing to be attentive to is legal. This has been touched on again already. A lot of different legal requirements that you want to be mindful of. And so you don't want to jump in blindly and start publishing your sales in specific countries, because even just the use of certain types of terms like that can trigger certain legal consequences if you're not prepared. If you go to the last slide there, just a few areas to get started. Again, these are low-hanging fruit. I sort of feel good for myself. I've got the easier job compared to some of the other presenters who are talking about some of the bigger hurdles to clear. But really the beginning point for any effort to go internationally is to make sure you're optimizing that content locally. We talked about how e-commerce platforms can support featuring that content, but you need to actually look at how to approach that optimization and how to create that initial optimized content and experience. Behind that, we really want to make sure that there is a clear way, if you have a strong US presence, that you're indicating that you have a new market focus. And then that's that second middle area there. If you have a great e-commerce site here in the United States or in another country, you can then use that to surface a new region or a new language or a new audience that you're focusing more readily. And Google will acknowledge that even if it's a brand new market for you. And then again, finally, I would say from a paid advertising standpoint, once you have that optimized content in place, look at launching localized ads. you do need to evaluate how they perform independently. One of the mistakes we often see new merchants and new markets make is that they begin to sort of assume that a shared language is enough in terms of localization. And so they lose sight of why certain ads are not performing as well as they could be, because they're assuming that everybody who speaks some version of a language is going to have the same experience and expectation. And that's just frankly not the case. So that's it for me, Josh, I think on that sort of sprint.
Jordan, thank you so much from Coalition Technologies, breaking it down. Obviously, Jordan has a wealth of knowledge. Here's his information if you want to get in touch with him. But again, thanks so much, Jordan.
All right.
We'll see you soon. Okay, I know we've got a lot of stuff to cover still, and we are trying to get through all of it in these wonderful nuggets. We've got Jordi Vermeer from Channel. Jordi Vermeer from Channel Engine coming to us live. Thanks so much, Jordi.
Thanks, Josh.
I'm trying to figure out
Is it working?
Yeah, it should be working. Let's see what's going on here. Try again. Never seen this one happen before. Perfect timing. So I'll pull it up anyway. Don't worry.
I can also pull it up if you prefer.
No, that's all good. But while you're doing it, could you give us a quick intro of where you're coming in from?
Yeah. Jordi, I'm calling in from New York. It's where I'm located, where our US headquarters is located. As you might hear, my accent similar to Thijs. I'm actually also from the Netherlands. Thijs is a close partner of us, and hopefully I'll be able to speak to you guys around the differences and kind of like between the US and the US culture that I've seen in the past 4 years living here, but also of my own country and my home, region, and some of the differences. So I'll try to mix in some of my personal perspectives as well,
Nice.
because I've seen that talking to American brands about their European expansion has been a pretty successful way of doing it with my personal insights.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jordi. Can you see the screen now? Does it say it?
Yes. I am.
Okay. All right, let's do it. So
Cool. Yeah. So first of all, and I'm taking a bit of a step back to kind of make you guys understand the market, the global market, but mostly what we've seen in Europe happen kind of like before what's happening in the US. In the US, there was a single company that was very good in expanding really fast in terms of their marketplace model, which is called Amazon, as all of you guys know. But what happened in Europe, as you can hear from all the other speakers, is that it is a much more saturated market. So we're seeing that actually the share of globally, the share of marketplace sales that's happening is now at like 56% happening on online marketplaces, and it's only growing towards almost 60% in the coming couple of years. And we're seeing that the largest retail channels have now all been converted. So this happened already around 5-6 years ago. This all started happening in Europe. That's where we're from, where our platform started, because there were so many different channels and to manage it from a technical perspective. And now we're seeing the same thing happening in the United States with the launch of Macy's, Belk, Best Buy, the Bain Canada, Target. Everybody is now launching their marketplace. Walmart was smashing it out of the park with the Q1 earnings. I posted on this morning. So we're seeing like a massive growth in both, of course, e-commerce, but also the marketplace share of e-commerce and the amount of retailers that are getting into that. And if you go to the next slide, you can also see some of that happening where, that's kind of the other side of the trend, where a lot of these retailers are becoming marketplace. Also, a lot of the brands are directly selling onto those marketplace. So a lot of the steps of the chain, and this is pretty logic, right? Everyone knows what's happening in D2C. A lot of these steps in the chain are being skipped. And that is a very important trend because in a marketplace model, so 3P, you have control of your content. You can give your pricing and kind of like, you can be in control, as opposed to having to rely on resellers, distributors, wholesalers, and going from step to step in the chain, where everyone has also a lot of inventory or overselling or underselling issues. You can go to the next slide as well, indeed, where we're not what I just said, like a lot of retail platforms are becoming marketplaces, but now also social platforms are becoming transactional marketplace. So of course, I don't know if everyone heard it, but TikTok launched in the UK and Southeast Asia. They might or might not launch in the US later this year. But there's a lot going on in the social platforms that actually also become transactional marketplaces. So everybody is getting into the space, and the trend is that you want brands to kind of like be directly integrated into these channels. A last trend that a few months ago, Amazon announced that they will stop working 1P, so the vendor model, with any reseller. So they're only going to go direct with direct with your brand. So there's a lot of things going on in the market, and you want to be ready for launching it. Glad to hear you guys are launching the Walmart Marketplace this week. All right, next slide. Yeah, so then the challenge is, what do you take into consideration? Because there are so many out there. You already saw Thijs mentioned a few of them. So I'm taking a bit of a more slightly maybe boring, but more strategic approach on what is out there, but what do you take into consideration? Because there's a lot of differences in channels. So you have, of course, the biggest players that we called out. There's a few very specific vertical marketplaces for niche products. Some do more services, some are more horizontal. So we'll dive into a few of these things. Generally speaking, still Amazon and eBay, they're very excellent, either cross-border, but also holistic marketplaces that we see in the market. And a lot of these local countries have some heroes, we call them. So we'll dive through some of those as well. But what's good to realize is a lot of them are curated. That's their power. That is also the power, because if you're curated, you don't have that much competition from certain regions that have very low pricing, like China or like the rest of Asia. And some of these platforms keep them away, and therefore you don't have to spend a lot of cost on your advertising. You can actually focus on if once you're in, like you can focus on just selling your products with the content that you want and that you have. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to deep dive, and we're doing this for every region. So we've already did this for the US and for a few other regions, but for Europe specifically, this is kind of like how the landscape. This is even scratching the surface, I call it. The biggest thing is what you have to realize: there are over 500 marketplaces today in Europe. So you will never be able to sell on all of them. Heck, you're not even going to be able to sell on 20% of them, right? So you want to make sure that you are on the right channel and that you choose the right path to which channel are you going to go on. A company like Thijs, like what they're doing is they're taking also your brand and they're going to do an analysis and see like, what is your product? Where is it going to fit the best way? So they run it, advice and strategy. Some of them, they can actually bring you in. So Channel Engine is a platform that integrates in terms of the technology, integrates to all of them. And it means you can operate all your content across all these channels, as well as your shipments, your orders, stock levels, kind of like a seamless integration. So if you have one or multiple stock locations, everything can be synced automatically between these channels. I'm going to dive in a few, but what's good to zoom into, I suppose, in my home country, what I usually share is, before I moved to the United States 4 years ago, I've never ever ordered a single thing on Amazon. I didn't even know really what it was, because no one was selling it. No one was using it in the Netherlands. So bol.com is by far the largest channel in the Benelux. And this is a misconception of a lot of companies in the US that don't realize how big some of these local heroes are, where like Thijs said, Poland has eMAG, or Poland has Allegro, where Amazon is still not larger than them. So yes, Amazon is very important, especially UK, Germany, and France. But a lot of these other countries have local heroes that are very popular. As an example, France has Cdiscount and FNOC, and they're almost together the same size as Amazon, right? So if you're not selling on those other channels, then yeah, you're going to miss out on it. And that's where a lot of the local people are buying it from. Also, Germany, we already heard Otto. There's also Kaufland. Those are more also generic marketplaces. They have a lot of offerings. Certain industry, certain verticals they do really well with. So it's good to take that into consideration. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that also we have more vertical specific things. So funny enough, I call it Zalando almost every day to friends we talk to, and half of them don't know what it is. And this is amazing to me because they sell in 23 countries all over Europe, and they have our fashion clients. So we're specialized in fashion, a part of our business, and we're seeing like the amount of revenue on Zalando is always bigger than Amazon. So it's a fun trend, and I'm gonna make a small prediction. In the United States, this is also going to happen. I don't know which company it's going to be, if it's ASOS or Nordstrom or any of the, or Macy's, but whoever is going to reach that mark first, because fashion is not as strong on an Amazon as it could be, because there is so much potential, or sorry, so much competition. It's very hard to be different from the market, and that's why companies like Nike, they just take off their products because they don't want to dilute their brand name. So Zalando is really good in curating and making sure it's all well. Wayfair, I think you guys all know, but there's a lot of different kind of platforms. Mano, and there's do-it-yourself. There's actually Otto is really good in home deco as well. And then lastly, you have consumer electronics that MediaMarkt Saturn, a lot of people wouldn't know, but they're the Best Buy of Europe, basically, that actually launched their marketplace a few years ago. And lastly, there's even more specific one, luxury fashion with Yoox and About You. There's sporting groups done by Decathlon. There's refurbished electronics by Back Market and Refurbed. Like, those are all very specific, but extremely successful marketplaces, and often even have more sales than some of the D2C in their own countries. Sonos is one of our clients, and as an example, how they use that to talk about brand expansion, how they use marketplaces is mainly to penetrate new countries, get brand recognition, getting the first like smaller orders, and then make sure that the repeat orders are on their e-commerce website. So it's very important to take marketplaces into your strategy when you're doing your launch, because these websites, these platforms, these retailers have all the traffic, have the name, have the trustworthiness of the market, as opposed to that you're going to try to drive them to your own website. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's a lot of differences. Some are open, some are curated, vertical. Well, you can look at this after the session, but there's a lot of things and differences between platforms. Companies like Channel Engine, but especially also Brandsome, they have a very powerful knowledge, but also relationships to tell you about this, but also to bring you into this, right? So we half the time we introduce our clients to these marketplaces because otherwise you're not able to get in. And then if you go on the next slide, it overall, and I'm quoting Salesforce here, so that's good that they were in this call as well. It also helps with the customer journey. In general, building your brand out there, it's necessary to be present across all these channels. There's a lot of examples also in the US about people doing their browsing on Bed Bath & Beyond, or maybe not anymore, but doing their browsing on Wayfair. They use the chat and then they order it on Amazon, right? So similar things happen in Europe, where a lot of browsing is being done across those channels, because that creates a trustworthiness around your brand. And then hopefully, of course, they buy on your .com, but often they will purchase on these websites. If you go to the next slide, you'll see these are some of the key, strategic, but also very practical considerations that you need to have in when you're operating a marketplace or wanting to go on these marketplaces. You of course need to develop a strategy on which channels you would like to go live on, but also what's your goal, or what's your strategy behind it, because it could be that you just want to expand to Germany, but just have a brand name in Germany, and you're fine with not having a profit at the bottom line, right? Because you just want to expand. So think about channels in that strategy. Think about your content, like you heard, SEO, but also just consistency across your brand. You want to make sure that that's done. Your inventory, you want to make sure it's centralized and that you can, postpone your post your inventory across all these channels, and not that you have to sell it like you have inventory with them, and with them, because then it will never be a full optimized sale through. Analytics, yeah, I mean, if you don't know what's going on, you'll not be able to steer into the right direction. Of course, there's a lot of competition, so know what's going on, but also make sure you have a strategy, especially on an Amazon. Like, make sure you know what you're going to do if your resellers are being present there. Are you going to reprice? Are you going to kick them off? Are you going to let them sell? You know, have a strategy for it, and make sure you focus on profitability. We see a lot of companies say, I want to push all my products on all these marketplaces, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. Make a P&L and look at what are the products that are profitable selling on these marketplaces, and which one of them are going to reach my goals with. And then once you set your foundation, then you can start testing and see like which other products could I sell profitable, or should I create a bundle to make sure I sell it profitable, right? And then of course your pricing is of course important. If you go to the next slide quickly on Channel Engine, we basically make sure all your backend systems can be integrated through a single integration into Channel Engine, and that helps you operate and manage all these different marketplaces, feed channels, social commerce, sometimes your e-commerce channels. So kind of like it's the one integration to control and manage it all. That's what we do. We do it often with the help of partners like Bransom, to make sure also practically you have the choice to do it yourself, where we teach you, or like some of our partners can do it. And in Europe, often we advise to use these partners to localize the content, to localize your strategies. And with that, on the next slide, you can see you can therefore increase your revenues, decrease the cost of operations, and stay in control on what content, stock, and pricing you have across all these channels. And the last slide is mostly a summary. Make sure your foundations are set up correctly. Amazon is not the biggest in every region, and use the local knowledge of those partners to have a right strategy on go-to-market.
That's like being shot out of a shotgun, talking marketplace optimization. I do want to take a quick moment. This is as I'm talking, this is a visual under the hood of how, again, Channel Engine fits a certain category of service providers. I've heard them called integrators, syndicators. Jordy, what do you call this?
I would say more an operations and management platform of marketplaces. So it's like really to manage it. You can see some of your categories, your attributes. You can map it. There's a lot of rules. We just launched our ChatGPT, so half of it is going to be automated, and really like also figuring out like these are here. You can see some of the orders come in and your sell-through rates and all those statistics. So it's a full end-to-end solution to manage your marketplaces.
To me, it's revolutionary in the sense the whole category of these types of service providers, because you're obviously not having to build out siloed groups in your company for specific marketplaces. You also, if you have 1,000 orders coming on one marketplace, and you've got a certain team dealing with inventory on that, you can reallocate to other marketplaces. You know, it sounds really, to me, like a great solution.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I say this with all honesty and love for those people on the call. So Jordy, thanks so much from Channel Engine. Again, I already posted in the chat. If you want to get in touch with Jordy and his team, please do. Jordy, thanks for joining us, and we will get that video out there and out on social within the next few weeks. Jordy is up and out. We've got Matthew Busa from Payoneer coming to us live. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Josh, or for having me. I'm
having you, and yes, everyone. We're transitioning again. I just want to show you. So that platform, I don't know what was that weird momentary glitch for Channel Engine, but you can go in there and you can see some pre-recorded stuff and some other information. I'm going to start now. If you're in the workshop, scroll on down, and we're going to start with, again, Matt from Payoneer, talk about cross-border payments. The reason why I wanted Matt to go right after the Channel Engine marketplace discussion is because there's a lot of work to be done around optimizing that payment piece of your sales on marketplaces when you're selling on marketplaces outside of the US. So with that, I'm going to, again, stop talking and go to you.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, guys. My name is Matt. I'm with Payoneer. I've been with Payoneer for 2 years, and basically my role here is to oversee the customers and to onboard them onto Payoneer, whether they're going to be using our bread and butter product, which is our cross-border payment solution, or our working capital solution, both of which I'll touch upon now. And I probably will keep this pretty short. I think our product and the way that we help online businesses grow on marketplaces is pretty straightforward and pretty easy. It's not a very overwhelming process. So I'm going to, I'm happy to share that with you guys now. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. So basically, these great speakers talked about before, one of the biggest challenges is, you want to, you're thinking about getting into the EU, and there's a lot of obstacles you got to go through. But, one of the biggest ones is, and the reason why we all start a business is, to make some money, right? You need to pay suppliers, you need to get paid yourself from your marketplace. And, those are all big challenges, especially if you don't know really where to start, or if you're dealing with banks, in which most banks, don't really know how to help online businesses as much as someone like Payoneer. So, just to take you through the payment journey for cross-border sellers, right? Specifically for the EU, it's very similar to the US, right? If you already have a US marketplace, whether it's with Amazon, Walmart, eBay, whichever great marketplace you're on, Payoneer is there to help, and it's all pretty similar, whether, like I said, you're selling in the EU or the US. So basically what's going to happen is you're going to have your products on your marketplace. I'm going to talk as if we're talking about Amazon, just because they are dominant, and I think that's where you guys will get the most value. So with Amazon, basically you set up your store, and you set up an EU store, right? And it could be, from France or Germany or Spain or any of these countries within the EU. And you're going to list your products on the your Amazon store, and people are going to purchase your products, right? So that money, the minute they're purchased and the minute the order is fulfilled, that money is going to go into what's called a reserve, and that's basically your cash reserve for your Amazon EU account. Usually it's different for all sellers, but from my experience, a lot of sellers I work with, their payout schedule is on a bi-weekly basis, right? So the cash that you're getting from each purchase from consumers is going to sit in that cash reserve for every 2 weeks until it gets dispersed to you, right? So that's the customer purchase, and then the payment processed, right? It's gonna be processed by your marketplace or by a third party. And then once you hit that 2-week cycle, and you're ready to get paid on all your sales for the last 2 weeks, your marketplace is going to do everything for you. They're going to collect their commissions. They're going to collect on their taxes before transferring the funds to you, which is the seller, in your seller account. And then you then have those funds. We like to call this your monthly average volume, right? This is your net income from what your marketplace is collecting on. Now you have to use those funds to pay your suppliers and to pay whatever overhead costs that you have, if you have employees that you have to pay, right? So that's just kind of like the payment journey there. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. Great. So this, I like to kind of, this 1, 2, 3 solution, it's very simple with Payoneer, right? Payoneer is the actual product, and it's really, it's very helpful to think of it in these 3 steps, right? It's money coming in, then the account itself, which is your Payoneer account, and it's the money going out. So I'm going to explain those. Basically, what you see listed right there, the money coming into your Payoneer account, this could be, like we just talked about, from your marketplace payments. This could be done by local or wire bank transfers from any colleagues or any other suppliers that might be having to pay you. Any type of credit card payments or bank debits that have to go to your Payoneer account is what Payoneer is eligible to receive in its account. And in-network payments, right? So if you have suppliers that also have a Payoneer account, just like you as a seller, there's absolutely no fee. It's basically like Venmo, right? You're sending each other funds directly in-network on the Payoneer product platform. And then second, the account. The account is legitimately the product that is Payoneer. It is you, the single POV, you control it. And think of it as just basically your Payoneer account is your access to all these different regions, including the EU. and all these different currencies, right? And then on top of that, we offer a feature, which I'm going to talk about more, is our capital advance offer. As I mentioned before, when your marketplace takes their commissions and you're left with the net income, right? Sometimes it might not be enough. And one of the biggest issues for businesses, whether they're online or not, is cash flow. And paying people, paying your suppliers, and paying your employees is some of the biggest challenges, for any type of business. So we have a working capital product that we match 100% of your monthly average volume, that net income that you're getting per month. And then we're able to, so let's say it's like, $10,000 a month that you're getting in net income. We will match that $10,000 with a working capital offer. And since we are a partner with Amazon, all you have to do is connect your Amazon store to your Payoneer account, and we can fund your store as long as you're eligible. And the eligibility is that you have to be selling for 6 months, and that you have to have a monthly average volume of at least $2,000 per month over the last 6 months. So pretty straightforward there, right? And then also within your account, you can send billing and invoices to your suppliers. As I mentioned, your Payoneer account is access to all these different currencies in all these different regions and all these different local banks within these regions. So you can manage your currencies and convert those currencies within Payoneer. And then third, the money out perspective, right? If you need to pay your suppliers, you could do that through Payoneer at a very minimal cost. FX rates is another big topic that I wanted to go over. Typically you would go to a bank if you have to, convert currency or exchange your currency. And it often comes with pretty lofty fees. With Payoneer, we can drop it down as low as 0.2% for every transaction from currency to currency. And like I mentioned, you could pay your suppliers. And another big topic I'm going to talk about at the end is your VAT payment, which if you're, expanding into Europe, that's going to be big, so that you can fulfill your taxes. And Payoneer does that for you very seamlessly on our platform. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. So very quickly on this, this is just what I was talking about. There's a lot of fees. There's different conversion fees, FX fees, bank fees that you're going to run into. Payoneer simplifies these fees. We know what it's like, and we know the volatility of the markets, especially in e-commerce. So, we're able to get very low fees, and we're able to settle, your transactions very seamlessly, basically as fast as you would if you were just using your, everyday local bank. So go ahead, Josh, you can go ahead to the next slide here. So as I mentioned, right? Oh, perfect. So as I mentioned, your Payoneer account is your access to the broader markets, whether that's EU, as you can see, GBP, which is the British pound, Canada, Australian dollar, Japan, Mexico, Hong Kong. The list goes on, right? It doesn't just have to be Europe, although that's what our focus is today. You could see, as long as you are operating your Payoneer account, you can pay your suppliers no matter where they are in the world using your Payoneer account and using the currency conversion feature. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. And then we're actually going to go to one more slide. I just want to, make sure that you guys are, just getting what's important. And one more time, Josh. Great. So as I mentioned, lastly, I touched upon, how you get paid from the marketplace in EU, and I touched upon, the working capital piece, which I would love to answer your questions, at a different time after this show. But your VAT, right? In the EU and in Great Britain, basically you have to pay what's called a VAT. It's your value added tax on all your sales that you make as an online business. And as you can see from the little demo displayed there, it might be hard to see, but you can pay your VAT strictly right through your Payoneer account as long as you have funds within that currency, right? So Payoneer also is connected to all local banks, whether it's France, Germany, Spain. We are partnered with different banks within those countries so that we can, that those, while you're paying your taxes, they're being done through banks for each country, right? So as you can see, the country is United Kingdom from this demo right here. and you can see, what's being paid for with the VAT payments. Pretty cool. A lot of people that are, expanding to the EU, this is what I see is their biggest problem, and the biggest value that Payoneer brings is this feature. And it gives you a little bit more peace of mind when you have to worry about tax season coming up for those regions. So you can go ahead to the next slide, Josh. I believe that is mostly all I wanted to touch upon, and what's relevant for all you looking to expand, your business.
Matt, thank you. Again, Payoneer is such a great solution. If you're selling on marketplaces internationally, this is the way to cut out that crazy, level of layers of people taking cuts out of your money when you're actually selling on a marketplace and you've got to use your US bank account. It's just the rails that Payoneer has created is great. I also love that a feature where you can actually pay your service providers, whether it's digital marketing or suppliers, et cetera, overseas. So you shouldn't be paying to repatriate your funds to only send it back overseas again, right?
Correct.
Very cool. Okay, Matt, again, from Payoneer, if you want, there's some videos further about it already from other events we've done that could explain it again. If you want to go through slower, get in touch with Matt. I guess this is the link. Oh, there's a book a call with your colleague, Yael. Should they use that, or?
You can use that, and she will communicate with me so that I can get in touch with whoever schedules a meeting and talk about anything that we went over today, and then some.
Cool. All right, I put her calendar like, God, you can book a call right away, right there. All right, cool. Matt, again from Payoneer, thanks so much.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for holding out. Okay, we've got really our last, I want to say, module coming up right now. We want to talk, when we're talking from market capital, we're shifting over to how do you get paid? How does the government support you? And we've got SBA coming at us right here, all the way down in this module, SBA financing. We have Mike Fazio. Michael, please come on down. Michael's coming. So he's literally walking down. He's been holding on. Thanks, Michael, for waiting around this much time. We've got a lot to cover, and we really want to get to your support. So thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Josh. And hello, everyone. Great to be a part of this panel and to provide you with some information of how SBA can help you out as a small business exporter. Hopefully, many of you are in the audience. SBA is a federal agency, and we are here for the benefit of for-profit small businesses that are located in the United States. And my day job is to specifically work on export finance, which is providing loan guarantees to banks around the country as an incentive for them to provide loans to small business exporters. What I'm going to talk about today is more broad. I'm going to go over not only the export finance piece of it, but also some of the policy and tools that are available to small businesses in the U.S. that are exporting, and talk a little bit about our grant program that eventually makes its way down to helping small business exporters. So if you want to move to the next slide, please. Here are the three broad topics that I am going to cover. So again, business intelligence, that's where you can get advice on exploring export markets. And that's something you can do on your own, online. And also later on in the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about how you could work directly with one of my colleagues in Washington, D.C. And then secondly, grants to reach international buyers. We do have a grant program that is known as STEP, the State Trade Expansion Program, where we provide funds to the states and territories that in turn deploy those funds to the small business exporter community. And then finally, the third topic is where I do most of my work, and that is helping small business exporters finance their sales through the lending network. Next slide, please. Okay. As far as business intelligence, you could see in the link in the previous slide, you can go right online and dig into all of our resources at your leisure. But we also have what's called the Fast Track service, and that's where you can set an appointment to meet with one of our senior trade and technical staff to discuss what your needs are specifically for your exporting business. And that can be introductions to other federal agency partners that we use. It can be through our networks of counselors throughout the country. It can also be help with things such as tariffs. So our folks in Washington, D.C. Can be of great help to that. And you can either call them toll free or you can email them. Next slide, please. And the tools, again, on the website can help you do a variety of things. Developing an export plan, which helps you directly as an exporter as you're considering what you're going to do with your business, what kind of costs you might incur, and the different people you can work with. Also, an export plan specifically helps you in the financing aspect of things, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But as with most things in life, if you have a plan, you have a better chance of success, and you can pivot and make changes where necessary instead of panicking when things might come up. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk about what everybody likes the most is grants. But I need to make clear that the grant program that we have, STEP, is the funds are deployed directly to any of the 50 states that participate or U.S. territories. So we do not grant funds directly to small business exporters. So I'm headquartered, or I should say I'm based in San Francisco, and I cover Northern and Central California. My hubs are Sacramento and Fresno. And the state of California does participate in STEP. So what happens is the SBA provides a grant to the state of California. The state of California matches those funds and then deploys them to the small business exporter community. Illinois, New York, Florida, Texas, any of the other states or territories that participate, they have the same matching setup, but they may do things differently. We don't tell the states exactly what they can do with those funds. They provide us with an application and say how they're going to deploy the funds, and that's how helps us make our decision as to how much we're going to grant, if any, funds. But in general, they can be used for training workshops. They can be used for trade missions, even to help you work on your website. It can be translation services, things of that nature. So I encourage you to go to sba.gov/step to look up your specific location to see if your state or territory participates. Next slide, please. Okay, financing challenges. So I think a lot of small businesses are experiencing this right now, and a lot of individuals are experiencing it right now. There are tighter credit markets and there are higher interest rates. So it can be especially tough when you're selling to a foreign buyer and your lender has to worry about where their collateral is located. So what we have with SBA is 3 specific export finance programs. Please move that to the next slide. They're known as Export Express, Export Working Capital Program, and the International Trade Loan. So 3 distinct products that have different purposes. Export Express is our most flexible product. It can be used for fixed assets, but it can also be used as a general line of credit and other things in between. Because it's the most flexible, it has a cap of $500,000, whereas the other 2 programs, Export Working Capital and International Trade, go all the way up to our $5 million cap. The Export Working Capital program is specifically to fulfill export orders. You wouldn't use that for real estate or equipment. The International Trade Loan, however, on that higher scale of $5 million, can be used for permanent working capital, real estate purchase, expansion, and also for equipment. So Those three programs are where we provide loan guarantees to participating lenders to give them an incentive to provide you with the funding that you need. So if you look at the bottom of that slide, which if it hasn't already been provided to you, will be sba.gov/international. That's where you'll find my contact information for my market, and then also for my roughly 20 colleagues around the country that cover Florida, Arizona, New York, Wisconsin, all points in between. Next slide, please. And then here is basically the wrap up of all the things that I just covered briefly. So if you're looking for that fast track service, use the 800 number or the email address. If you want information about STEP in your state or territory, sba.gov/STEP, export finance, look us up online. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you want a personal introduction to somebody in your market. Then also, if you just want to do things on your own, look at those trade tools online. And last but not least, if you really want to stay informed and get regular updates, we do provide a newsletter to the lender and the small business exporter community, and you can sign up at sba.gov/newsroom. So if you want to go to the last slide, that is it for me, except for any questions that you'd like me to cover. Thank you.
Michael Fazio from SBA, thank you very much. I'm going to highlight a couple of quick things. So again, you've got the slides, past the slides that Michael talked about. You've also got some very detailed information we've put here around SBA export loan products, kind of how do you deal with it, what's the chart, all the different procedures, some of the information you have there. We've got a video going through certain aspects of the financing, and we also have talk about SBA. And then right here, a lot of the links that Michael was talking about. So if you want to know about the loans, you want to know about the details, where is your SBA office, where are your finance managers, we've got a bunch of different information from various people around the country. But a quick highlight, so you've got financing to go global, you've got grants, $5,000 to $10,000. Some of the states use the federal money and then they match it with additional money. And we have actually a STEP grant navigation tool that's that you can use as well to build your application. But contact me anyway separately on that if you want. But so many resources that SBA is doing to support small businesses in the US going global. And Michael, thank you so much for all the work you're doing.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Okay, before we close out, I want to highlight a couple of things here. Again, there's a bunch of other models here. We've got the, again, a whole thing on STEP grant right here, which is what Michael was talking about. Ex-Im Bank will help you if you're a B2B company, some of you were B2B, and you're looking at overseas buyers and you say, well, I've got an order coming in, but what if they don't pay? You've got export buying insurance or buyer's insurance that's covered here that can actually provide a little bit of insurance to say they're going to, if they don't pay, you'll still be covered. That helps you when you want to get that loan to produce the products so that you can actually fill those orders. That's all right here in that Ex-Im Bank Working Capital Guarantee Program with a video and all sorts of information around banks and brokers that do that. Then we've got the U.S. Commercial Service. If you're not familiar with that, they could find distributors for you overseas. They could find licensees, joint venture partners. They can also help you do single company promotions, so you can actually help promote your products once you're in market using sometimes the embassy and some of the physical spots that they have in 70 of the leading markets around the world. And then the Minority Business Development Agency, which helps specifically minority and women-owned businesses by having advisory services to help them. They have an export group specifically for exporters around the country so that you can actually get the support you need and guidance, handheld guidance. Of course, we have the SBDC programs as well, if you're not familiar with, which are advisors on anything from how do you run your business and deal with accounting to actually some digital marketing and some really interesting tools. We run a few programs for them around the country as well. Tons of stuff. You've already seen it here. Quick shout out. We have 2 upcoming events. We have in Spanish, Cómo vender en América Latina a través del comercio electrónico. We are going to be doing this in Spanish about how to sell into Latin America via e-commerce. We've already done one in English. All the videos and everything are still in there in the programs right there. And then we'll be doing Amazon for global growth hacks. We've got Amazon talking about multi-channel fulfillment, but we have non-Amazon agents and other programs that will actually talk about what they're seeing and how to leverage the platform. So really cool stuff there. But all of this stuff is supposed to be used not live, but whenever you feel like it in all these roadmaps. So go through it. There's videos already from all previous things. A lot of great stuff. Again, I've put in the chat, if you want to book 15 minutes with me, you're welcome to. I put that book call right there. But again, so much information. We appreciate you staying on this whole time and all of our wonderful speakers. This has been another event of the Grow Big Initiative, a roadmap to global, selling on multiple channels and geographies. We will see you on the next one. Thank you.